right now. And also at some point, I will start the PowerPoint recording as well. I've not made the PowerPoint recording available yet, but I will make it available as well. So pretty much we've been focusing on descriptive statistical analysis, and because we're looking more at the quantitative side of things, and we have been doing some qualitative in prior weeks as well. So we mentioned earlier where we started from the inferential, you sort of drawing conclusions, like saying based on this number, I can actually conclude that the general should also look like this. So let's say you do a sample with let's say 20 samples out of maybe 1,000, and you are saying that out of the 20, maybe 18 people said they agree. So you would say out of the whole population, 18 should be satisfied that maybe having the experience of an international college before the university will give you a better life, a better student experience at the university. So that's just we made a conclusion based on the small sample analysis. We did a smaller sample. So inferential, we're making larger conclusions, we're drawing generalizations and other things. Whilst descriptives, we're sort of looking at the data presenting, and we are describing how the data looks really. And correlation, looking more at the relationship between one data and another. So without touching too much on every single one of them, we went on from measuring the data, different levels of measurement, where we watch various videos as well to help us understand what these levels are. And we had conversations among ourselves with regards to what it meant to us. And I do remember when we were talking about it at this point, posed a question to those online, and it was a bit of silence online. So we went back to the classroom and we had the more discussions in the classroom as well with the, of course, the online people involved. But I think I'll just blame it on maybe some audio issues or some things when we were playing the video, maybe. We talked about cases where the actual numbers do not matter because we are just using numbers to identify things. So in terms of the value of the numbers do not matter. Then we also looked at, of course, we assigned the values, all right, but the order in which these numbers are arranged also matters. So you can see first, second, third, more or less. So in terms of order of appearance matter, and then we look at the interval between things. So it's not necessarily related, but it's just the interval between them. Then we look at the ratio. In terms of ratio, when you say what is the percentage of the other, if you remove the 100%, it just become a fraction of the other. If you remove the 100 from that in terms of percentage. So the levels, sort of one level is a subset of another, and they also build up by adding more features to the previous levels. Then we went a bit more to talk about the mean, the median, and the mode. So mean being the average, the median being the middle number. So we're just focusing on centeredness, right? And the mode giving us an idea of which number actually appears the most. Then we looked at a range of numbers. So you're looking at what is the range, looking at the minimum number and then the maximum number in a set of data that you have collected. Then we started to think about, okay, so if we say on average, everybody scored, I don't know, let's say 50%. And also we're looking at a particular point of the data to say, let's say this particular data is maybe scored 60. What does it mean? As far as the particular 60, is it very significantly higher than what other students scored, or is it significantly low compared to what other students scored or other samples had? Then if you look at, so you look at the mean, on average, what was the score? And then you look at the sample of interest, and we're saying, okay, what's the difference between that sample, the value of that sample and the average score? So if it is very big, then you can actually say, of course, it varies from the mean. So it diverges from the mean in a significantly positive manner or in a significantly negative manner. And with that value squared, because when we are doing subtraction, with that value squared, you get a variance. And if you find the square root of that, then you find the standard deviation. So more or less deviating from the norm. So that's sort of the concept between the variance and the standard deviation on there. So if you go more about centeredness, give you a bit more about how to calculate them. And I think there was the skewness, which is the bit that also the odd one out, put it that way, right? And we looked at what the effect of the mean, median, and beta, the mode in terms of distribution and how they relate to this particular skewness or this odd one that suddenly decides to get either 100 out of the what everybody's scoring, maybe below 40, or everybody's scoring above 90, and one person suddenly gets 20, for example. So pretty much main recap of the stuff that we've been through. The rest is just the calculation of it. Can I pause here to double check? Do you have any question up to this point? Are you happy for me to continue?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
you can continue.
Thank you very much. So pick it up from there without actually overcomplicating things or going too much on the data side and everything. We want to look at on the numbers, I would say. We want to look at graph representation. I personally kind of like these slides and the ones moving forward in terms of materials we'll be looking at as well, because it also considers the actual analysis of the data, like example around how the data is being described. So it gives you an idea when you are putting words on paper as well. So not necessarily to copy what has been done, but sort of just to give you a guidelines in terms of how you can describe the data or how you can word things. So I'm going to turn on the recording now for the slides. Bear with me, please. As I make this smaller. Okay. So I do have two screens. If you see me looking on the side, it's just because I've got a tiny screen hiding on that side as well. I'll be using mainly for the reading of things. All right, so graphical representation, basically visually representing data, so we can actually see what the data is about. Visualize data graphically. I think yeah, it skipped a slide. Let's record from here. And so we have several data points. I mean, when we started earlier, by all means, you can use Excel to draw these things. I mostly when I work with large data or anything, I mostly use Excel to draw them because it's ease of use as far as I'm concerned. Others who use specialist software may prefer to use specialist software. I mean, I've seen in my field, people use things like MATLAB also to just generate graph, and it will give them some analysis. You can use SPSS. You can use other statistical analysis softwares that allow you to draw. The key thing is that as long as it helps you generate the data, in a way that you can interpret it, in a way that you can visualize them properly, then that's by all means welcome. If I'm creating this graph, right, I know we're not talking about the analysis here, but if I'm creating this graph and I really want to represent it properly, I will get rid of the background, the background color there, the gray background color. I'll put a bounding box here. So I'll have like a black line going all the way there and all the way there. You can see that at the moment this line is thick, that line is thick, this one is very light. It's just formatting thing, but it normally makes your paper look really good. And then I also get rid of the major lines. That's the lines going on in the background there. And these ones, normally I will remove the filling of the markers. So if you make just the filling, that pink filling, so you have the borders, do the same for this and probably change this one to something slightly different, and it becomes a lot cleaner. If you are putting an image like this, if you generate with Excel, it will straight away add the heading for you as well. But if you're putting it in your writing or in paper, remember you're going to have a caption anyway. So you have something like figure something, and you have your figure 5, and then this particular writing there is just going to come to the bottom anyway. So you will get, I will get rid of this from the actual graph as well. So I will have a larger version of this diagram, because at the end of the day, this is where the data is. And I will move this legend up here. You can do it. It gives you the access to that you have that much flexibility to edit your graph. So I'll move this, but I'll make it one line. So I'll free up this space. Let me see. I'll free up this space. And also free up, because this is sort of more square, make it one line, free up space over there by moving this also down. And then this image can actually fill all of this up to this point and a bit more all the way up to that point as well. So you have a larger image, larger data to work with, and it becomes a lot cleaner, a lot nicer. Anyway, so jumping straight into things, when we see the data, what do we see? We see two things that are most important, but mostly ignored by students, which is the axis level. So I've got the x-axis in years, so at least I know the data that's being collected is spanning over years as well. And also I've got the y-axis label. Of course, if you've got a z-axis or if you've got secondary axis, the secondary axis data will also be on this side as well. So you have more data that you are representing. What that simply means that you can move one of these graphs on a different axis, if especially the range is, let's say if you have this data ranges from, I don't know, start from 200 to 1000, whilst the rest start from 0 to 18. So in that case, if you put it there, it wouldn't, these two wouldn't be clear. So you move it to another axis, or just move to a different graph. So axis label is very important. So I know what your data is about, what data you are describing. The title, you can move to a caption, of course, to make it easier to see as well, so you do not forget it. If you include a figure, make sure you have cross-referenced the figure in your writing as well. So normally that would be, let's say, figure 1. Don't say figure above, figure below, because the writing can change anytime. You may ask you to add something, and we move to the next page and everything. So just say figure 5 shows, figure 5 does this, figure 1 does this. And remember, figure names are proper nouns, so it needs to be caps as well. All right, can I check? So far, so good. Happy for me to continue.
Yes.
All right. I know I'm giving a lot of information about formatting and other things, but you find it funny that most reviewers, without even looking at your writing, we'll look at the graph first, because when the graphs are catchy, when they go through your document really quickly, especially data representations you've generated yourself, it's sort of the first thing people see, even when sometimes even before they read your abstract, they just to gauge the kind of writer that you are, whether you spent a lot of time on the work and whether or you just did anything that they'll use. If you have spent time on the work, then they are definitely going to spend more time reading your work. If the work is done in a very shabby way, normally sort of lose their interest as well. And it's something that reviewers are kind of skewed towards when it comes to reviewing your work. But of course, the idea of this module is not just to prepare you for my assignments, but also to prepare you for research activities you'll be doing in the future as well. Okay, so moving into things, make sure you've cross-referenced your work. Easy way of doing this, I mean, I personally prefer, if in case, let me say, you can see my screen. So if that will open for me, I can just go through some things. Just bear with me. So just inserted an image. Can insert caption by right-clicking, because most of you use Word, but I normally prefer to write with LaTeX. So that's inserted caption for me. In my writing, I believe I can do insert cross-reference somewhere if I can find it. Cross-reference, numbered item, paragraph number. Let me see, figure. And I've got figure 1 there. So instead of enter, insert figure as a link, entire caption, only labels and numbers, let's see. So that gives me figure 1 there, and I can simply write on it. That's simply because if you do it this way, one, of course, it makes it easier for the user to navigate, but also when you cross-reference in the text this way and you insert another figure, and the figure numbers change. So let's say I insert another one, and I can just insert another caption. In this case, I've inserted a figure before what I did previously. So the next one, if I do update all tables, it's going to update this caption to figure 2. So in that sense, this will also automatically change to figure 2. So when I'm writing, I don't have to bother too much about afterwards, I have to go through every single figure to change the figure name and other things. And normally when we start writing large documents, especially if you started writing, then your first dissertation, you're going to write your second dissertation and other things. Those are the things that end up taking your time, or you kind of forget. You forget that you've inserted a figure and figure 1 has now become figure 5, and you see all the figures are out of place and other things. So those are things that also unnecessarily take the grades of students because you just get marked down for report quality and all those kind of things. But automate it, make your life easy. If you have a different tool that does that, by all means, like I say, I use LaTeX. It will automatically do that for me. I don't have to worry about it. But if you are using Word and you've not used this feature before, I will encourage you to do so. If you've already been using, of course, life is perfect. Good. So back to what we have. 2002, we've got, let me pick pen color. I don't know what color goes. Probably blue or green. Yeah, blue. Right. So 2002, we've got, we noticed some things, maybe some 2 data points starting around the same value. I don't know, 7 or something like that, referring to 7 people in millions, so 7 million. Okay. And one of them sticking at the bottom, and then just looking at it, that particular one sticks right below all the way throughout. So it's ranging from what? 3 million to about 4.2 million, roughly. And these are the non-Asian countries. Okay, so I'm looking at this as we go. So non-Asian countries, maybe it's taken a grab somewhere at the bottom. So what are we talking about at this point? Oh, we're looking at the number of visitors who go to Hong Kong by country. Oh, sorry, I've sort of canceled that. I should get rid of whatever I put there. But you can see between 2002 and 2009. So the range is quite clear and makes quite sense. So we've got the minimum going to the highest. But at the same time, we noticed, people from mainland China seem to go to Hong Kong a lot. So it looks like, even though by 2009, it's quite popular among people, visits to Hong Kong, it's quite popular among people from mainland China. It hasn't always been so, because at some point, it used to be almost the same as people from other parts of Asia. But that sort of stayed, I don't know, fairly stable, isn't it? It's sort of within, I don't know, about 10% range in terms of how it's varied from the years, or 1% range, whatever the values actually tell us. So I've not read anything yet. I'm just looking at the data, trying to see whether I can make sense. And I'm reading it from the angle of maybe someone has done the study they've presented to me. And I'm thinking, oh, this is interesting. One, what can the data tell us, right? At the moment, we are looking at descriptive analysis. So what can the data tell us just in terms of description? Then afterwards, I'll be thinking, okay, this person has done the study. Maybe this is all the data from the study, or there is another data they're going to present to me. What can the author or the researcher tell me about the data? Because the researcher is the expert, technically. All the research you are doing, You are the expert in the room. I've not done the study. I've not designed the study. I've only guided you along the line. So you are the expert, and I'm thinking, what can I learn from your data analysis? You are the expert because you have read the literature relating to this work. So do not forget, when it comes to, I mean, you present the data, right, and everything, but when it comes to your analysis, what does the data tell you in relation to the literature review you did earlier or you are doing now? Okay, so reading through, if people are happy for me to continue, and I can check. Can I check to see whether you can hear me up to this point in the pace at which I'm speaking is all right?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yes, we can hear you.
Good. Hopefully you can hear and follow as well. I think hearing is one thing, and also following is another thing. As long as you understand me, I'm okay. Right, so let's see how this person interpreted the data they have presented. I really don't care about the color coding in this particular case. Of course, if you like to, you're gonna have certain stuff. Right, so I like the blue color. Nope, there's blue color over there. So let's go for green. That's also green. There's also many colors. Anyway, doesn't matter. If it becomes too much, you see and you tell me. Right. So I'm going to read through really quickly. Hopefully not too quick. Let me read through it. Right. So the graph shows the number of travelers from various parts of the world entering Hong Kong for the years from 2002 to 2009. So even though the graph is there, even though the caption is there, the author is letting us know what the figure is about. If I were writing this, I would just say figure 4 shows this, that. Or depending on how I'm flowing previously, I'll just say, however, with reference to this, the number of people, that varies from this, as shown in figure 4. Furthermore, the figure also shows this thing. So it just kind of flows in that way. And in that sense, you don't necessarily lose the reader or you don't suddenly jump to it. So the danger with this approach is that some authors, well, some students will tend to be talking about something different. Then suddenly they jump straight to this, which doesn't normally make sense. So it depends on what you write before this. As long as you make sure that you tell one good story, I'm a happy person, and also, of course, your writing will breathe. Okay, it can clearly be seen that there has been a large increase in the number of mainland Chinese visitors, while figures for visitors from Asia, as well as other areas from the world, have only shown a slight growth. So again, picking on the scale as we talked about earlier, even before we read. The number of mainland Chinese visitors visiting Hong Kong have risen considerably over the time period. So here, other people or people who like statistics or people who want their work accepted in most big conferences or most big journals will pick slightly different wording. So they may go like, if the graph is looking like this, if the graph, let's say the first graph is looking like that, and I know Quadri is done stats, people go, okay, the graph rises exponentially, the graph rises linearly, the graph, so they just use those terminologies just to relate various fields that they are familiar with, or in terms of when it comes to visualizing data. And the research community tend to like those kind of things, because then they know that of course you are quantizing it somewhere. We are talking about quantitative analysis anyway. So it kind of tend to spark interest. So they just know exponentially between this time and that time, then it goes linearly, then we say this way. But however, in this particular sense, there is nothing wrong in saying that, of course, it's just significant increase or large increase, but mostly the large maybe will be replaced by significant or something. Good. Where were we? Let's start with the second paragraph again, right? The numbers in mainland Chinese visiting Hong Kong have risen considerably over the time period. In 2002, there were nearly 7 million mainland Chinese visitors, similar to the figure of other parts of Asia, and just over double that for non-Asian travelers. So it's done very well by picking on this point, which we picked on right at the beginning. So it's told us about it, which is good. So it means the person is paying attention and it's what the reader expected and what we expected to see. I'm sorry, was that a question? Something that you want me to talk about? I missed, it was a mistake. Somebody had the microphone on. You can put it back on to talk to me again or leave a chat. Something in the chat window. I don't see any chat in the chat window, so I'll just carry on. This number climbed to approximately 8 million in 2003, then rose dramatically by 4 million to just over 12 million only 1 year later. Since 2004, there has been a steady increase with around 18 million mainland Chinese travelers visiting Hong Kong in 2009. This is more than double the number of that year of other visitors from other parts of Asia. I like this part where they start to use something like some ratios over there as well. Normally, people would focus on the differences. So because instead of telling others like this corresponds to that, that corresponds to that, other people will focus on how this more or less relates to that. So in that particular sense, we are looking specifically at, okay, if we are targeting advertisement, for example, should we be targeting the places that we are already making money the most, or we should be targeting these people who do not have interest in visiting us? In that sense, that research can also lead a bit further by looking at which countries are the non-Asian visiting. Is it because of proximity? Maybe they have other places where it's easier to travel to and they are giving similar offer. But if they are not our target market and we just want to increase this number even more because that's where we are making more money, then we can get some slightly more analysis a bit from the data itself, where it's looking at, and of course the relative as well and how it relates to other. So if you think about it in that sense, it gives you a stronger hand when you are representing the data. Right. The figures of travelers from other parts of the world show similar trend. First, a dip of roughly 1/3 of the total numbers of visitors from 2002 to 2003, then slow growth until 2007, followed by a leveling out. Okay, interesting description. Overall, the numbers of Asian tourists rose from 1 million from just 7 million in 2002 to roughly 7 million, roughly 8 million 7 years later. While the corresponding figures for visitors from non-Asian part of the world were roughly 3 million to 4.5 million respectively. Good. Have some descriptions, some analysis. We've talked about our preference or alternative ways that we can actually describe the data by using the various levels that we have said earlier. But of course, if you go in the ratio approach, you've got other levels that you describe as part of it. And also we've made use of mean variance and all those kind of things that you can later present if you wanted. Okay, but what I like about this is that it gives you a summary of the data. So it starts out by telling you what the data is and tell you what the data is about, tell you what the data is and give you a summary there, right? So to sum it up, in recent years, Hong Kong has become an increasingly popular destination for visitors, especially people from mainland China who currently outnumber those from all other parts of the world. 287 words. I don't care much about word count limit in terms of going over if you're writing relevant things. I'll emphasize on in terms of going over because I realize I need to emphasize on that all the time. But in some areas, please note they do, or some tutors do care about it a lot. So in that sense, there's a way that you can be concise and brief and right on point and still manage to hit the word count. I'll pause the recording here and ask you, do you have any question for me at this point? If no, let me know. If yes, let me know. I've just inserted the table and the figure, right? something, something, something. Did you say you're okay, as and I can stop? She's gone.
I wanted you to show us how to auto set the figure numbers.
That's which is what we are doing. So this is the table, right? So table, right click. I've just simply selected the table, and then you select it by pressing that. Yeah. He said it was too fast, so I can go slower.
All right.
Yeah. And then you right click, which is pressing, if you're using a computer mouse, just right click. If you're using a laptop, you use the two fingers to right click. Yeah, just press once and then you go on the touchpad. Then you go to insert caption. What I changed, the bit that you said was too fast, was in terms of the label options. So you've got equations, you've got figures, and then you've got tables, right? So if I insert table now, I can just say table of something. And I can press OK. Then I can also go into for the figure and insert caption as well, and just say something. But it's a table now, so I change that to figure. Yeah, so that will auto generate for me. But you notice what I was saying earlier. The figure caption goes beneath it and the table caption goes above. And of course, but by all means, you can change the formatting as well. You can make it, at the moment, the font size is 9. You can make it larger. You can edit it and other things. And I believe when you are done, I mean, when you're doing cross-reference, for example, so if I go to insert, I always have to look for it, cross-reference. I've got the figures because I've selected figure tables. That will go for table 1 as well, and I can cross-reference table 1 in my writing. But I forgot to change to select only the table, not with it. Yeah, you know what I did. Let's go back. Table, not in entire caption, page numbers, blah, 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 label and number only. So that'll bring table 1. And I just say table 1 shows, so many blah, 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 whatever. And then someone will put into bracket table 1, and you just insert your caption straight away. But I believe that when you are done, you can insert tables. I have to remember really quickly. References and table of content, not just table of content. Can find it for you. Insert table of figures. So that should also pull out the tables that you've used in the document. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you are writing a bigger document like a dissertation, see table 1 something. So you can have table of content, and then you have table of figures and table of tables, tables of equations. It's all easier to generate, but like I said, even though this seems way easy, I still prefer to use LaTeX because then it will do everything for you straight away once you get really familiar with it. I can show you the LaTeX environment as well if you want, but that's not what you're using, so there's no point. I'll let you have your break. I don't think probably the break is over already.
One last question, please.
Oh, if you are choosing to stay, then no problem. But I've given you a break. Right, yeah.
Let's say I'm using somebody's model or maybe chat or graph, and I use it in my work, we'll turn it in, highlight it as somebody's work, even if I have referenced the person under the table. I don't know if you get my question. Yeah.
Yeah, so you do something like that, and you can state which source you got it from.
So, but we'll turn it in, like, give me a similarity rate for that.
For the figure.
No, for like, I use somebody's graph to interpret.
It's a figure.
Yeah.
It's still a figure. Yeah, Turnitin do not care about figures. The thing is, don't insert figures, tables as figures. That's not right. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
And don't just, I think I've talked about that. Don't just pick image sources. I was showing you, hopefully it's still there. Oh, somewhere. Where's the paper I was showing? I'm showing a paper. Oh, we still got, wow, we talked for 15 minutes. How quickly did the time run? So don't just, if wherever possible, if you can draw your own figure, use your own figure, okay? Because then it may not pick it up. Even your tutor may not pick it up. But if you're not careful, you become too comfortable with it and eventually becomes part of you. And as some very important writing, it may come back to bite you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Typos are the final document. Right. So things like equations, even though it's coming from a reference, it didn't go in as a picture. I'm not the first author here, but it's a paper I'm familiar with. Okay. So it went in as an equation. It didn't go in as just drag and drop images. Still have to be written down, still have to be referenced. Even though the writing may have changed, it's still coming, the naming and other things were changed. It's still an idea coming from a source. So because the idea hasn't changed much. This image drawn by the student themselves, but not necessarily my preference of image tables going in as table. But some things way before this particular writing, there were images coming from some sources. This is a very generic image, even though they've drawn it themselves, they don't necessarily need to reference the source. This one also very generic image and other things, which ideally should have referenced the source, but nobody really care much about this because it's not necessarily a model. But if you are using a model, then it's a well-known model, then you have to cite the model so people know whose model you are using, because maybe you've not reached the stage where where you have developed your own model yet. You don't have to pretend that it's your own when it's not. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Yeah. So
yeah.
if you are simply adapting a model, just as the brief gave you a model that you could use, if you're adapting a model, you just say, I've adapted this model, and then you just put into bracket, figure this. So that will give the reader an impression of the module. The adaptation went this way. The rest is what you have done to it. So you're not simply picking and dropping bam, and everything is just talking about the model itself. No, you just use you just use someone's thing. You've just used someone's thing, and then you are using it to make a point. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's less about turn it in than, I don't know, it depends on the context. Like this image is not mine. If I'm showing people your and stuff, and I can use to show and I say where the source is from, if I'm just simply saying, the university website tried to be as inclusive as possible by using images for people from several backgrounds and several religions and other things. I've been demonstrating some things, or demonstrating, let's say, female in education. There's a lot you can say about the image by looking at it. But if it's just, that is the image, you're going to figure it out, or everything I've done is just what is already there, then people have problem with you using the image. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Yeah, that's just the only advice I can give you in that direction.
Thank
Hopefully
you.
it's helpful.
Yes.
Okay, so thank you very much for coming back. I'm just going to go back into the slideshow. We'll finish the slides and we see what we need to talk about more as well. So hopefully you see in the bigger screen this time. I can go to the next one, which I will delete and also record the data. All right, so similar to the previous graph, where we have one that is more line or bar graph or histogram, we depending on whether you have spacing between the graphs or not. I tend to use this a lot in most of my own work when I'm representing the data because of the nature of the data that I have. So in my sense, again, if I look at the image, we'll just do a slight adjustment straight away. We'll move this back up there. We'll make it one line. So we have maybe August to something, August 8, and then that on the line. So we free up space. Then we expand this one to the side and also to that side. And the more we expand it, these labels are going to expand straight on anyway. We've got number of people here, unlike the other one is not in millions. So normally the unit is in bracket and we don't have anything in brackets here. So normally that's where the unit falls. So pretty much, okay, gives us some information. Maybe the person thought because the country names are sort of self-explanatory or very intuitive, they didn't add a caption for country, which you should. By all means, just make life easy for yourself and your reader by labeling. And like I said, we get rid of this background. We get rid of the major lines just to make it look cool. And sometimes you get people say that when they print it out, so you get black border. It sounds horrible, I'm rolling. But you get the idea. You get the idea. So black line border throughout around. So back to the point. We make it black, of course, not. Some people will tell you that when I print it out, I can't tell the difference between the labels or the data that you've used, because if you print it out in black and white, this is probably going to be gray. That's going to be darker gray or something, but it's not very clear. So some people will use some patterns, and you can insert that if you're using Excel or whatever to generate this data. Of course, you can use patterns to clarify or make it a lot easier. So the pattern will be applied to all. Some people will also use maybe 3D. So you've got something like a 3D visual view of the image itself. So it looks something more like that. In addition, I thought I changed the pen, but I didn't. So it looks something more like that, and it sort of stands out or bulge out. So different things make it a lot easier. And hopefully that's changed to color black now, and hopefully this will be better to use it. Yeah, when I can draw straight lines. You get the idea, get a concept. So it becomes a lot easier to tell the difference between the bars that are in the data, and it becomes a lot easier to read. So again, similar things that apply to the previous one applies to this one as well. I'm going to read through the description of the data, but straight away, as soon as I look at the data, I'm thinking, okay, what is this about? So there's something in Hong Kong. Hong Kong seems to have very low values. Okay, so that's interesting. Let's see later what we can actually infer from this. And it's not just Hong Kong and France. But then it looks like, I don't know, in terms of stability, it looks like Germany seems to be somewhere in the middle on the average, but I don't know, not necessarily average, similar to that of USA, but it looks like a particular bar in USA kind of stem out because it's sort of an anomaly. It goes up and it goes down. What is it trying to tell me? Maybe August 08, August 08, something happened in the US that made it because it's not really consistent. It looks like the stable points are around here. So what happened around? So I'm picking the data points I'm interested in. Again, I see a rise there and I see a rise here. And this one, Hong Kong behaves similar like US, but it's pretty much stable. So it's not that important. And even though this is stable, it's also a bit of a rise. Then it looks like 08, whatever happened to the US also affected Canada. But then US and Canada are not too far from each other. So it looks like the data is almost the same. But what causes, I don't know, mid-China to be really on the rise? Germany somewhat, okay. So I'm kind of skewing towards trusting these two data sets. At the moment, I really don't know what is happening, but I'm thinking as I'm looking at the data, right? And we're looking at, okay, so permanent and long-term arrivals, in New Zealand by country of origin. So similar to the other graph, we are looking at people who go to New Zealand, but mostly for long-term. Okay, that's interesting. So it looks like mostly mainland China, again, they seem to travel a lot. So it's interesting, we can draw some inference between the two. Then US, but there was a rise and there was a fall at some point. Is the rise really significant? Was there something happening in New Zealand around that time that a lot of people from the US and also Canada wanted to go there? Even though Canada is on the low numbers, that 2008 has sprung interest at this point. So I'm thinking along the line. And it looks like if we were to go on, Germany will probably be stable on a stable rise. It's just some inference we're making, but we're not really sure yet. It's just what the data, impression the data is giving us at the moment. Okay, are you happy for me to continue?
Yes, we are.
Thank you. So on that note, I'm going to read through it as well. Hopefully you can see the bigger screen this time. And as I read through it, just stay with me, all right? So let's see what this person has said. Again, we would rather give the figure name. So figure one shows the number of immigrations to New Zealand from various parts of the world for the month of August 2000 in the years 2007 to 2009. So quite similar to the other one. Again, tell us what the graph is about. That's where this one has started as well. Okay, different trends can be seen for people arriving from North America, Asia, and Europe, while immigrants from mainland China show the greatest increase as well as made up the largest proportion of immigrants throughout most of the time period. So straight away, he's picked up the anomaly and then of course describe how actually the values received there relates to the others. So it's things that we sort of picked up, things we were interested in knowing. They've started telling us about it a little bit. Okay. Right, the figures for people moving to New Zealand from different regions of the world showed, can't allow me to go back, which means I have to stop this recording. The rest is reading anyway, so I'm not going to record a slide over this, and hopefully you'll catch up on that. The Zoom recording is there. The rest is just reading. I hope you don't mind because I don't want to delete what I've already recorded on the slides, okay? So the figures for people moving to New Zealand from different regions of the world show diverse tendencies. I really do not like, well, I don't necessarily like this line. The reason being, if we go back to read, right, different trends can be seen for people arriving from North America, Asia, and Europe. So basically, at this point, you've already summarized to tell me that we have different trends anyway. All right, and then also you've gone on to single out the key point. So the trends are not that similar. I get that they are trying to create a connection here, but at the moment it's sort of a repetition for that particular line. Not sure whether you agree with me, but it's just the impression it gives me, because at that point, you don't want your reader to work too hard. You can create a link, all right, but not necessarily repeat things in a different manner that the reader will feel like they're doing too much work than necessary. Okay, so when we go to the bottom, I'm going to have a problem at the bottom because I've got this, but let's read as much as we can. The numbers of North American immigrants firstly peaked at the late end, at a little over 150 for Canada and just over 400 for USA in August 2008. So again, done very well by picking up this particular anomaly here for both Canada and the USA. So that's data that we expected to be talked about as well. Then declined by 60 to 80, by around 60 to 80 the following year. It will be interesting to know why. Did something happen? It would be great. That's your big point, to pick something from the literature as well. If you can relate to, did something happen around that time? There's something you can tell the reader as far as the main topic is concerned. Long-term arrival in New Zealand from the two European countries show a continuous slight rise, with the number of France and Germans reaching around 70 to 310 in 2009, respectively. Normally, respectively, you want a comma here first, so there should be a comma there. Right. In contrast, the figures for permanent arrivals from two Asian regions, Hong Kong and mainland China, showed completely different trends. The number of mainland Chinese immigrants grew sharply, almost doubling from about 300 in August 2007 to approximately 550 in 2009, comprising the largest group by 2009, around twice, a bit of pressure going on there, the size of the group from America and Germany. On the other hand, numbers of Hong Kongers, I didn't know Hong Kongers, so I didn't know that was a word. Settlers in New Zealand remain stable at around a certain number, blah, 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 to 1/10 the number of mainland Chinese in 2009. It's mostly descriptive, but I think the anomalies sort of raise questions of what happens, right? Well, what happened at that point? It makes us want to find out, so at least we can make some conclusions or something. It wouldn't allow me to move things around. What a shame. Okay, so pretty much similar to the last one, something also comes up. I'm not going to use the pen at this stage, but something that sums up again a summary of the writing. So they have a similar trend or similar writing style in terms of analyzing both the data. There is some task, some reading to do, or some reading I wish you would do, but I'll pull that up in a second and I'll point you to it. But being aware you're probably busy writing at the moment, let me go to it before I stop the recording. Oh yeah, just bear with me. Let's bring it up. I think we've already seen this one, right? Have we seen this? Don't think so.
No, we haven't.
Yeah, because there were two documents that I made you look at in the previous one, but not necessarily here. Let me just make sure they are available to you first. My variance is one that we don't need to read about yet, but just calculation stuff. We're not going to bother about that, which you can do anyway. But there were two documents. So if nope. What's the point in having that one? Okay. Don't care about that one too. So this particular one should give you some analysis on there. Can read through it quickly for you, but I would encourage you. Yeah, pretty much similar to the other one. I'm just going to look at the structure with you, if that's all right. Yeah. So without delving too much into it, a bit about what it's about, what the study is about, or what the data represents. And normally you pick up the key thing you want to draw the attention to. Analysis of the data itself. I think the ones that we've just gone through give some further details compared to this one, not necessarily my preference at the moment. And then you go, after you go into the data, details of the data and everything, then you come back to summarizing or picking out the key thing you want the reader to know. But I'll just go on a bit further to say, of course, like from the last one we've seen, when it comes to your actual discussion of the data, you want to make reference to literature and also what can be drawn from those ones, not necessarily making big inference, but how does it relate to the literature findings that you had earlier as well, to put you in a much stronger position rather than. So when people reach here, sometimes there's a clear disjoint between the remainder of the work and the literature, and you don't want that because that will sort of make things slightly more difficult for you. Okay, so I'll stop this. You know where to find it. If there is more material I need to make available to you, I will make material available.